Thank you so much, Dan. That's amazing. Does anybody on the call have any questions for Dan?
Yes, could I ask some questions?
Of course, Lucy.
Very interesting the topic
Mhm,
because I am working in the healthcare also, so it's very
mhm,
interesting to hear your experience and your passion will
mhm,
be the future doctor. From your the presentation, I know you got different connection with the healthcare field in the different country. Have you been
mhm.
in China or can you speak Mandarin?
Yeah, so I can speak a little Mandarin. I think now, especially, I haven't used that much Mandarin recently, but I grew up speaking just Mandarin in at home, and I went to Chinese school when I was younger, and so I do speak. I think conversationally. I don't think I can have any debates about economics or things like or politics or things like that. But I do think I can. But I have been able to visit China a few times, especially growing up because I still have some family there. Um, but I have not been able to go back very like frequently, especially over the last few years. The last time I went was in 2018, and that was a part of semester at sea. So I didn't get the opportunity to do any volunteer work, especially in like more rural areas. But that is something that I really do want to be able to do in the future, and connect back to my roots. And my fourth year thesis project for my global health major was the lack of primary care providers in like rural China, and I would love to be able to serve those communities in the future as well.
Yeah, I know so far there are some like non-profit the organization in Canada and US.
Mm.
They contribute, the professionals, they contribute or donate to build up like a school or like a local clinic in the west east area of China because there is kind of like a remote area, still the poor village there. And I also know there is an organization for the Chinese immigrants, the medical doctor, the organization. They did a very good job in COVID. They donate a lot of PEP for the
Mhm.
Chinese hospital in that
Yeah, that's
very
great.
difficult time. Yeah.
Mhm.
I hope you can be the the one of them, in the future,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I would love to. That would be a an honor and a privilege to be able to do that in the future. So I would love to in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, Dan.
Congratulations, all of your contribution to this war.
Oh,
It's
thank you so
amazing
much.
job.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Lucy.
Thank you, Lucy. So Dan,
Mhm.
you've been to so many countries that people would think dangerous. So
Mhm.
before you went, did you have any concerns, or if now a young person, if he or she wants to do that, do you have any experience or lessons to share?
Yeah, um, I think for me personally, especially I think 5, 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, I probably did not have as much fear as maybe now that I do. I think when I was younger, um, I was a little more fearless, and so when I traveled to these places, I did feel some concerns, but I don't think they were that strong that would prevent me from going to these places. But I also admit that perhaps that had also resulted in some carelessness um, and like yeah, I think I wasn't super prepared, and I was very fortunate to have been able to be safe within these countries, especially. And so, if I had any advice for anyone who, like younger people who want to go to these places, I think it's very important to do the research to learn um, about why people think this place is dangerous, and even if it is dangerous, I think it is also important to take those things with a grain of salt and with some skepticism to understand that there is some bias within media. And so, um, to use your personal discretion from travel from your like personal experiences and from your research, and to also um, do some research and talk to people who have been there recently, to see what their experiences are. I think there are a lot of places that are in active war right now, and those are places I think I would definitely not be visiting, like at the current moment, but I would love to visit in the future, for example. And I would say like that is maybe a line to draw for sure. There are also a lot of countries on the United States, like security advisory listing, like level 1, level 2 danger, don't visit. And I think I usually take those with I'm usually a little more skeptical about those, because a lot of those like crimes that they mention are, a lot of them are small crimes, or a lot of them, there are some, I guess, more violent crimes, but those are not like more violent than a lot of cities in perhaps America. And so I think just having, I guess, being open to experiencing cultures and visiting places that perhaps are not as conventional, I think is also just an amazing way to expand like your global perspective. So I think it's an experience that if someone wants to have, I think they should definitely go for. But to be careful and to do research and to talk to people who have recently gone to those places.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Dan. It's Denise again.
Hi, Denise.
I just wanted to commend you on your achievements. You're an amazing, you sound young man. And I I just think the world would be a better place if there were more people like you.
Oh, thank you so much, Denise.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed, and I also liked your description of the sunset on the island. It was beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Yes, I see Ines has raised your hand. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to thank you, Dan, very much for sharing your experience. I've been listening with my 9-year-old child
Oh,
and
that's great.
been typing notes.
Mhm.
Yeah, and he was very touched when
你
you
不说
shared
你先吃吧，我现在还是饱的。
yeah,
Mhm.
about people you spend time with, like Gert in Albania, and those ordinary people, but like those are just the figures that left in your life, that has had an impact in your life. So it's just like it's inspiring in the sense that every day we do things like the little things, we never know what impact it has on other people.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you
so
so
thank
much
you
for
very
your
much.
words. Thank you for being here too, and thank you for your son for being here as well.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
And
Hi.
then if
Mhm.
does the kid have any questions?
No.
No
Oh,
question.
okay. Nice to
Hi,
hear your
Dan.
voice.
Dan, I have another question because I
Sure.
read the article written by your father.
Mhm.
So I like to hear from you, like what kind of, the good part, the influence you from your parents, your family, to
Mhm.
be a good, very good person.
Yeah. Um, I think for I think my parents, so they have, when they finished college, they got married and then they moved to the United States. Um, and with I think just $60 to their name, but through their, I think, hard work and dedication and their passion for, I guess, building a family and giving us a very good life, and just seeing how much they worked for us, I think that was something that I respect a lot and admire. And I think that hardworkingness is something that I had also inherited from them. And I'm not sure if I'm nearly as hardworking as they are, but I think that's something that really influenced me. And I think when I was growing up, my parents had always really wanted me to be a doctor. And I think they really wanted to be able to leave a big impact on people. And from what I understood, they really wanted me to become a doctor, not for the money or the prestige or just, but to help people. But I was kind of a rebellious child. And so I really didn't want to be a doctor at all. And I wanted to be a paleontologist. And so, but eventually, as I did a lot of volunteer work, and I think being a doctor kind of just made sense. I love to serve people. And I think I was naturally pretty good at the sciences in my uh, in school, and so that became a natural, I think, progression to be a doctor. But I think the way that my parents always described like helping others and being kind to people, those were things that I had always, I think, taken as I was traveling, and so those were all really important things for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Dan, have you had any surprises like what like during your travel?
Surprises in what sense?
Like you never expected like this would happen, or this country, or the things there, or any any encounter that now jump into your head,
Mhm.
some surprise, either pleasant or unpleasant.
Sure. I think a lot of the experience I mentioned today were all complete surprises, and a lot of the people that have helped me, and as Enos had mentioned, like the people that I had like met and had helped me along the way, those are all people that I never expected to meet and never expected to have a conversation and never expected to learn from on my travels. I think those are all things that I'd hoped to do, but I didn't know if that was something that would happen and when it would happen. Um, and I think in terms of like I mentioned the Pacific Islands specifically, I had never known really anything about the Pacific Islands until I got there, and everyone was just so friendly, so kind. They wanted me to feel at home. They wanted to welcome just a complete stranger into their families, into their homes, and to share their culture. And I think something that I never would have learned unless I started traveling was that when you meet people from around the world and when they don't have as much opportunity to travel to other places, I think they really, really want to share their culture as well as learn about like my culture. And so I think those intercultural exchanges were very surprising in the beginning, but things that were um, incredibly important for me to grow as an individual. I think another surprise, as I mentioned, was I think going to some of the places that maybe less conventional, more dangerous. And those were the places where I found the kindest people, I think. Um, so there were those kind of surprises. I mean, I think there were also some challenges or some difficult moments. Like there were a couple of times when people tried to rob me in Colombia, for example, and um, but I was fortunate every time like people would come to help me out or um, and and yeah, help me get out of those situations. And so even in I think bad situations, I've always been able to see some of the positive sides of just humanity and basically everywhere I went, which was I think just a very incredibly humbling and amazing thing.
So usually you go by yourself, or you have some buddies?
Usually I travel by myself, but I have had like recent trips that like perhaps I go with a couple friends um, or with my girlfriend. But those trips are usually more maybe a little more vacation or more like we want to do this or do that. And I think when I travel by myself, there is a degree of I want to see this, I want to do this thing. But there's also the flexible component of like I just want to meet people and experience the culture. And I do get to do that with all the other types of trips as well. But I think when it is a solo trip, there is that extra flexibility that I can do things however they come, I guess.
Any other questions for Dan? Just please, yeah, unmute yourself and yeah.
I've also pasted the GoFundMe link in the.
Oh yes, please.
If people want to see that, and so if there are a lot of the updates that I mentioned throughout my last few years, and so you can see all those updates and some of the stories that are there. I pulled a lot of the pictures that you had seen today from those updates. So if you want to see a little more, they're there.
So I was going to ask you about do you have any blog to, record your encounters or your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think when I first started traveling, I had a blog that I was writing a couple stories on, but I think for me it was a little stressful because it takes me a long time to write things. And it was kind of stressful kind of coming up with stories while I was traveling because if I was doing that, then I didn't have as much time to relax and to meet people and to learn things. And so it kind of became like a chore to do a lot of the writing. But I always did record things in my journal, and so I do have like a record of things that have happened. But I haven't been able to find the time to be able to, I guess, like tell these stories in like a story or text format. But I would like to in the future. But I think one thing that I did do a little bit was like through Instagram, I shared a lot of those pictures, and there were a few stories here and there that I was able to share as well. But most recently, I haven't done too much sharing on Instagram either. I'm very busy, so.
As a medical school student, yes, and also still doing some work for the clinic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for answering my previous questions and sharing your beautiful trips and stories. That is very amazing to hear. I am so I also have a daughter in university, and but she's out. She hasn't got a chance to listen to your story, but I'm going to share with her. The thing is, you have reached such a maturity to be able to have this courage to have this many solo trips and taking those risks. That is not like everyone can do. Right. So yeah, what do you think the most important thing that move you to go to see places?
I think, like I mentioned before, my very first trip to Kyrgyzstan that I mentioned earlier, that was with like a big team. And so I didn't go by myself, but it was then that I had learned and experienced that, like the beauty of intercultural exchange. So I knew that was something that I wanted to see and wanted to experience more of. But I will have to admit, I think any of my especially in the very beginning, I was always very nervous before like any solo trips. And so my first solo trip was, I guess this was not completely solo, but I had traveled to Tanzania by myself, but I had met so many people and did the internship there. But that was my first time going to a different country by myself. And I think that was very scary at first. But once I had that experience, I just I learned so much and I met so many amazing people that I still keep in touch with. And then from then, after that, doing semester at sea, I was with so many peers. And then after that, I just wanted to jump into solo traveling afterwards to in Europe. And I think that was a pretty good introduction to that didn't require too much culture shock. And so I think the things that drove me the most was wanting to find that intercultural exchange, as well as just meeting a lot more new people. But I think the thing that gave me the initial push was having that experience and gradually making my way to, I think, solo traveling. But I think that something that has really shaped me as an individual. And you had mentioned maturity, but I don't necessarily think that I'm still I think, growing as an individual. But I think I've learned a lot from these experiences, and especially through solo traveling too.
Do you consider yourself outgoing?
So I think sometimes I am and sometimes I'm not. I think naturally I tend towards introversion. So I like to spend a lot of time at home actually, and especially like during the school year when I'm very busy with studying. A lot of people study together in groups, but I think I study best by myself. And then when I want to relax, I think I like want time for myself, but I do love people as well. And so when I do get to spend time with people, even though it drains some energy, it is something that I really love, and getting to know people's stories and interacting with them. So I would say in those moments I'm outgoing, but as a person, I think I'm a little more introverted.
So, like when you go to those strange places, you approach them first, or you usually?
I think if there's a combination of both. Sometimes I also want to be cautious of like local customs, and like and I don't know if I should be the one approaching people, but a lot of times people come up to me, and especially because I look different from other people, they are very surprised to see someone like me. And so I get approached a lot in countries where I don't look like the average person. I've also like utilized some platforms called like couch surfing, and so they have hosts from around the world who just want like who offer their homes for free, and then I get to stay with them, and we get to talk and do this intercultural exchange. And I think that is like a situation where like perhaps like I'll send them a request, and so that's like out of my own volition, but there is already like a contextual understanding that there is like an interaction. But there are also times when I'm staying at like a hostel or like a guest house that I try to approach other people. So I think there's a balance for me. Sometimes I approach others, and other times other people approach me too.
Okay. So most of them from the Workaway, right? That website.
Oh, the Workaway, that's only for like the volunteer stuff. And I've only done two Workaways, one in Kenya, and then I worked on a farm in Japan for a couple weeks. So those are my only two Workaway experiences. All the other ones, I mentioned like couch surfing is like a platform that I've used. And then some guest houses I just find like on booking.com or something like that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course, yeah.
So Dan, you're Chinese American. So when you talk about the culture, when you present your culture to people, what kind of culture you present, and what do people see you? Does your say Chinese face and American demeanor or language matter, or in which way, or doesn't matter at all?
I think in a lot of countries where like the community is very homogenous, like in Africa, there are not many like Chinese people. And so the first instinct a lot of people have is that I'm just Chinese. So a lot of times people will just be like on the streets, they'll like point to me and say China, China, or something like that, because they haven't ever really seen many Chinese people. And so initially, that I think in countries where there's not much interaction with foreigners, that's the first impression that I give is the Chinese aspect. But I think culturally, while I am very proud of my Chinese heritage and the traditions and the language, because I've grown up in America, I think that is definitely the bigger part of who I am. And so culturally, I think I'm more American. And so during my conversations, I think it is pretty clear that I take more of like, I guess, an American stance, but that is at the same time very proud of my like Chinese heritage. So I think in my interactions, especially if like it's an extended conversation or I'm able to get to know someone and they get to know me, I do present both sides of that. And sometimes the Chinese side comes out first because that's just what I look like. but then the American side more because that I think that takes up more real estate as my individuality.
Yeah, I guess when you talk to people, when you interact with people, just your personality, right? People just see you as an individual. So,
right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that much at the end of the day, right? Maybe.
Right. I think there is a little bit of that where it is just individuality, but I think there still is like people still when they meet someone new, I feel like a lot of people still need to put people in buckets. And so I think I would still be put in like an American, but like two different buckets, but right next to each other, like the Chinese and American one. And so I think I would say I probably am a pretty unique individual, but at the same time, I think I'm still very seen as like a Chinese American as well.
Do you see any advantage or disadvantage or any barrier in that like area or
I think sometimes I think in terms of my face I think I am a little more ambiguous, like my face doesn't necessarily look 100% Chinese, and so when I'm traveling in Asia or somewhere I a lot of locals think I'm like that country's local, and so I've been able to get some like discounts and things like that, or like people will come up to me and talk to me in like their local language, and then I speak and then I can't speak in the language, and so there's some interesting like interactions there. I think in terms of disadvantages, there I think within international relationships, America and China have like very large presences, and sometimes there have been like I've interacted with people who like that come from countries in which like they might not be the best of friends with America or China, and I think that has led to some conversations in terms like what do you think about this thing or that thing, and I would say 90% of those conversations are very curious. They just want to know more about like what I thought, and like they want me to learn about what they think. And so there is that advantage of just being able to have that, like I mentioned, the intercultural exchange. But also the flip side of that is that there are every now and then, like I think especially when COVID first happened, I remember being in Bolivia, and as like especially in the very beginning of COVID, China was painted as the place that like COVID came from. That everyone was there was an increase in racism towards East Asians, and so I experienced that firsthand in Bolivia. And they told me that I had to leave, get out of their country, and go back to my country in China. And so like that, like there has been like pros and cons, and like I've had experiences all across the spectrum for sure.
But nothing can deter you.
Yeah, I don't think even those negative experiences, I think I know that for every one negative experiences, I will probably have 100 really beautiful experiences. So I don't want to let those bad things deter me from being able to experience the other beauties in life.
So having experienced so many cultures, what is your overview of this world? Like, so I guess you're more optimistic about our future.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially now with there's a lot of I think terrible things going on in the world. And oftentimes, I think if we're so plugged into the news or so plugged into like our phones and I guess learning about like these terrible things that are happening, there is this degree of cynicism or like like of a negative outlook on life. And I think it is very fair to have those things because I think the big news articles are always things that have a lot of emotions tied to those, and a lot of those are negative. And it is very hard, I think, to break out of that. But I think through my travels and being able to talk to people and speaking to people who have been in very terrible situations, like going to Rwanda. They had a genocide in 1994 between uh, the Hutus and Tutsis. But even just like a couple decades later, I've seen just how resilient people are, and that people will always find ways to overcome challenges and overcome differences. And even though there are a lot of differences in the world that have created conflicts, I do think that a lot of those conflicts can eventually be resolved, and I think that's something that I look forward to. But it is challenging in, I think, today's environment. But I think I'm personally a little more optimistic.
Thank you. And I think, like what Denise said, we need more people like you in this world.
Thank you.
Yeah, really, when I saw your story, I said, okay, I really wish we had more people like you. And yeah, that gives us hope. And I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thank you so much.
As the next generation Chinese American. Yeah, to be so positive.
I really appreciate
proud
that.
of you. Yeah,
Thank
very
you so much.
inspiring. Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah, and I have another question.
Sure.
As a typical Chinese parent, usually they are very concerned about the kids safety.
Right, of course.
Do you have experience that will your parents worry about where
I
you
think
go
yes, for sure.
and what do you do? What do you tell them?
There was, I think, one time, like I think my dad is a little more okay with me just doing anything, and so, but I think my mom sometimes is a little more worried. I remember being in the Pacific Islands. There's not much like Wi-Fi or like network that I had, so there was one time that I wasn't connected to any internet for a few days, and so I didn't reply to my mom, like one of my mom's texts, and so she had contacted, I think like the State Department and asked where I was, and then they contacted they had my itinerary, so I sent them that so that they can like have an idea of where I would be. But they contacted the embassy of the country that they thought I was in, and then I finally got Wi-Fi, and then I received a bunch of messages, and then I had to talk to the ministry of like the embassy and tell them that I was okay. But I have had a couple experiences then. I think now I just try to make sure that I keep my parents in the loop if I ever have any time when I am not super connected. But if like aside from that, I do know that they probably do worry a little bit, but they do trust me enough to make those kind of decisions to travel and to keep myself safe. So
yeah, that's very good.
Yeah.
Dan, you have a brother. Like, do you is your all the experience a inspiration for him or a pressure to him?
I think maybe I'm not sure. I would probably guess maybe a little combination of both. But I also know that he wants to carve his own life for himself, and so I think that's something I respect as well. And but I think the comparison I think is not like very fair for him. And something that I think was a little challenging when I was growing up was I think being compared to a lot of other very high achieving people. And I don't want to be someone that I think people will always kind of compare to. But I respect him a lot, and he's doing his own thing. So
yeah, definitely. Because I have two boys that are so different. I'm proud of them, like both.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you much. Sorry.
One probably last question.
Sure, of course.
The clinic you just first mentioned. Do you have a next stage plan for it?
Sure. So right now we don't have like another stage. I think right now, because I am currently quite tied up with medical school, it's a little difficult to dedicate so much time to plan and develop like the next things. but with the new the new maternity wing that we have just created, I think that's something that we want to utilize a lot more. We just like that was created maybe a couple months ago, and we've been able to use that a little bit. I think some of the next stages we would love to continue doing those outreaches, but also expanding the facilities that we have and be able to do like maybe some surgeries and things like that. But that would also require having like surgeons or physicians come to the island. Something I didn't mention is that on the island there are no physicians. There are only physician. Like they have there's a position called clinical officer, which is the equivalent of like the American or Canadian like physician assistant, but they have a little more autonomy, as well as a nurse. And so we would probably want to have more clinicians within our clinic, as well as be able to figure out a way to partner with hospitals to have like maybe volunteer physicians come to work on the island as well. But I think those are some of the next steps that we're thinking about, but we don't really have a timeline right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Okay, so I think we can call it a day.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Dan. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, when you come to Toronto, be our guest.
Okay, sounds good.
Mhm.